As morning breaks in Honolulu, overnight clouds disappear. It's another beautiful day in paradise, and work as usual for Henry Fettinger.
My father was a painting contractor, and we had a job right outside the main gate of Pearl Harbor called the Makalapa Housing Project. So December 7th, some new pickup trucks came in over the weekend, so my father asked me if I'd go out and stencil the job numbers on side of the doors of the pickup trucks, and I said yes, I would. We lived maybe about a 25-minute drive down to Pearl from Waikiki. And it was a regular Sunday morning, and hardly any traffic on the road whatsoever.
7:02 a.m. While Henry drives to the harbor, two Army privates at a radar station on the North Shore pick up what appears to be a flight of unidentified aircraft 132 miles north of Oahu. They report the information to Fort Shafter, but the only person there is a new lieutenant who had just started training 4 days earlier. 7:20 a.m. The Japanese fleet, now 210 miles from Oahu, have launched a second wave, 268 assault aircraft. The inexperienced lieutenant at Fort Shafter feels certain that the unidentified planes are B-17s, scheduled to arrive from the mainland at 8 a.m. He instructs the radar station to shut down.
I got there about, I would say, about 7:30. When you went through the gates of any of those military bases, you were checked pretty thoroughly.
7:25 a.m. An early morning church service is being held at the Kaneohe Naval Base. Turret gunner Leon Kolb is getting ready for his day on the USS Oklahoma.
I'd been out to have my meals with the rest of the division and back in the gun turret and getting ready for the daily Sunday routine and port routine in the gun turret. I was rated a gunner's mate, second class petty officer, and was stationed in the forward 14-inch gun turret.
The Oklahoma was one of the finest battleships in the American fleet. But a day earlier, she was moved from her customary defensive mooring on Battleship Row.
Normally, my ship would have been back where the Battleship Nevada and Arizona was. We belonged to that division. But the admiral aboard the Maryland was going to inspect our ship on the following Monday morning for readiness for war. To do that, we had all of the so-called double bottoments and storerooms and so forth opened up to air out, so it was more comfortable for the inspecting officers to go through and see the condition of the ship.
Opening the exterior portholes and interior hatches for fresh air made sense on December 6th, but on December 7th, 1941, it would leave the battleship dangerously vulnerable.
We were the most unprepared we could be.
7:35 a.m. Japanese reconnaissance planes radio back to the Armada that the main American fleet is in Pearl Harbor. Approaching the island of Oahu from its mountainous eastern coast, the first wave of Japanese squadrons are not detected by radar. There is a dead zone caused by the mountains. Plus, American surveillance planes are not in the air on Sunday mornings. This facilitates the element of surprise. Admiral Yamamoto realizes he must eliminate the American naval strength in the Pacific if Japan is to be victorious. The Japanese believe that the American public will be discouraged by heavy losses and stay out of the war.
December the 7th, like any other Sunday morning, Mom in the kitchen making breakfast.
On this morning, 6-year-old Dorinda Makanoa-Nalani is at home with her family. In 1941, she is one of just a few thousand Americans living in the Kingdom of Hawaii. The islands are not a state, but a territory of the U.S. They would not become one of the United States until 1959, 18 years later.
We were about the only civilians that could actually be in the harbor and watch the battleships and the planes come and go. Little did we realize that Pearl Harbor would change from being a place to being an event.
7:52 a.m. Commander Mitsuo Fushida, who leads the Japanese air attack, radios back the code, Tora, 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 meaning success, maximum strategic surprise, Americans caught unaware. At 7:55 a.m., the island-wide attack begins. The first wave of Japanese forces attack at points all around the island of Oahu, not just Pearl Harbor. Dive bombers strike at Kaneohe Naval Air Station, while dive bombers and fighters attack Bellows Field.
Being a squadron communications officer, I was assigned to the 86th Observation Squadron at Bellows Field on the windward side of the island on December the 7th. In the morning, about 7:30, those of us who were in the BOQ, Bachelor Officers' Quarters, up on the top of the hill above the airstrip, we were all awakened by a crash landing, a B-17, at the end of our runway. And the crew was semi-hysterical, saying that they were attacked. And while we were talking to the crew, a flight of Japanese planes came in and strafed. They were so low, you could see the faces of the pilots. During that attack, every man for himself was scattered. I remember I jumped under the shack of the operation shack.
"7:58 a.m. Horizontal bombers arrive at Pearl Harbor. No one even suspects they're Japanese.
Before the war started, our own aircraft used to make mock raids and their maneuvers on Pearl Harbor. They'd fly over and they'd start to dive down, and they make their maneuvers, torpedo planes or dive bombers, whatever they were at that time. And so we kind of got used to that because the fact they were making probably the maneuvers maybe every 2 or 3 times a month. And I heard the airplanes, and I saw them start to dive, so I went back to work, and then all of a sudden all hell broke loose.
Waves of bombers continue to pound military installations in an all-out assault on the island. But the Japanese aren't limited to military sites. They're also bombing civilian targets.
Hearing the roar of airplanes, airplane after airplane going over, didn't seem unusual. After all, we lived in a military installation, and yet there was something different because the explosions by this time were shaking our house.
Anyone who can grabs a gun and fights back. There is massive confusion as Americans try to grasp what is happening. In a tragic case of bad timing, the scheduled American B-17s and the U.S. aircraft from the Enterprise arrive Pearl Harbor at the same time and are caught between enemy and friendly fire. 8:05 a.m. Machine guns on battleship Nevada open fire on torpedo planes. Repair ship Vestal, moored next to Arizona, opens fire. Battleship California receives torpedo portside at frame 1110. High-level bombers begin the run on Battleship Row. One of the easiest targets is the defenseless Oklahoma. On board, the only thing Leon Kolb is expecting is sabotage.
When the first torpedoes hit my ship on December the 7th, I thought, that's what's happened. After the second or third explosion, the officer of the deck came on our communication system and said, "All hands man your battle stations. The enemy's attacking." And it went through my mind, who's the enemy?
Amidst the frenzy, American soldiers are still unsure who exactly is attacking them.
And one of the fellows said, "The whole enemy fleet's right off of Diamond Head." I had to go outside and look for myself because I counted 5 and 6 more explosions, and I thought, what's hitting us?
We did not realize it was Japanese airplanes until I saw what they called a meatball, their insignia. So I stood out there for a while and watched the raid. Believe me, those boys could fly the planes. They'd come in on their torpedo run or their bombing run and turn those things up on its tail and come back to straight. So they were darn good pilots.
The first wave of the Japanese attack on the island of Oahu is a stunning victory for the enemy. America's Pacific Fleet feels the sting of newly perfected torpedoes designed specifically for the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor. Violent explosions rock light cruisers, mine layers, and battleships like the Oklahoma. But this is only the beginning. The second wave of the Japanese attack is about to begin. At 7:55 a.m. on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, the Japanese begin their strategic surprise attack on Pearl Harbor and the island of Oahu. Every military target is being hit. In defense, Americans put up whatever resistance possible, but it is no match for the onslaught. 8:08 a.m. Local radio station KGMB interrupts music to call all military personnel to duty. High-level Japanese bombers are unleashing armor-piercing delayed-action bombs from 10,000 feet. One scores a direct hit on the battleship Arizona. The mighty warship sinks in less than 9 minutes.
I looked up and I saw the high-altitude bombers come along. I did see the Arizona blow up, and the smoke and flames must have gone 500-600 feet in the air. I mean, it was awesome, absolutely awesome. Somebody asked me if I was scared. I said, "You darn right I was scared. You know, who wouldn't be?"
2 ship lengths away, the USS Oklahoma is an easy target.
I thought, this is going to be the closest I'll ever come to death without losing my life. I wanted to go back down to my locker and take the things out I had, seeing I was going to have to leave the ship. One of them was an engagement ring that I just bought for my wife. It was a full carat, but something told me to save my life.
The Oklahoma is hit by 10 torpedoes. Explosions have ripped holes throughout the ship's armor. And because portholes and watertight hatches had been left open overnight, seawater is surging into the ship.
There's no portholes in there so you can look out and see what's going on, but you sense that the ship's going way out of balance. By that time, others had started going over the side, so I assumed they'd heard the word to abandon ship. And I was one of the first 2 or 3 to swim to an officer's boat. Dive bombers come over. I actually followed the plane in until it dropped the bomb on the Pennsylvania, which was in the dry dock.
8:14 a.m. The Oklahoma has capsized. Turret gunner Leon Kolb has barely escaped with his life. But hundreds of men trapped inside the Oklahoma's hull can be heard pounding against the steel. High above the blazing wreckage, 19-year-old Japanese airman Taisuke Maruyama witnesses the destruction of the bomb he dropped.
The bomb my plane dropped hit the battleship Oklahoma. Since it was my first mission, I was happy that my bomb did hit the Oklahoma and we won the battle.
Desperate attempts to free the men trapped inside the overturned Oklahoma will continue on into the night. 8:15 a.m., KGMB interrupts regular programming for a second call, ordering all military personnel to report for duty, including doctors and nurses.
I was stationed at Tripler General Hospital. I was assigned to the maternity ward, and of course we had a lot of enlisted men with their families there. But coming from Pennsylvania, of course, I hadn't seen all this tropical paradise like that was. The amount of military that was there was really overwhelming. But, you know, we were completely removed from any thought of any war. I don't think most of us even realized there was a crisis there. I was in bed, sound asleep. 2 of our night nurses tried to get us all awake, and we thought they were joking. We thought, oh, this is, come on now, this is, you're kidding. Can't be.
We had 3 casualties. 2 pilots, one attempted to take off in the bravest act I've ever seen, while under fire, stepping into his plane, was strafed and fell over like a movie scene. And another pilot did get his plane into the air. He was shot down.
At 8:26 a.m., the Honolulu Fire Department responds to a call from Hickam Field. Of the brave unarmed men who are trying to save lives, 3 firemen are killed and 6 are wounded.
We didn't have guns up to that time. They opened the armament shack, and there was no loose ammunition for the rifles. So we took bandoliers and machine gun shells. We were laden down with arms.
8:50 a.m., the second wave of Japanese aircraft come in from the north. Their plan of attack is to once again strike military bases all across the island with fighters, horizontal bombers, and dive bombers.
3 of us were ascending the stairs from our barracks up to the hospital, which was up on a knoll. We could look over to the left and see Pearl Harbor and tremendous explosions, and a plane came flying very, very low over us. And it was a Japanese pilot, and he looked out and he smiled to us and he waved to us. And we all 3 waved back, stood there and waved back.
8:54 a.m., the second attack run begins. 78 dive bombers hit ships in Pearl Harbor. 54 high-level bombers hit naval air stations. 36 fighters circle over the harbor to maintain air control.
When we arrived on duty, they were bringing them in. The ambulances were lined up outside with patients from all over, you know. Some of them, there were a few civilians that they'd picked up off the streets, but most of them were Hickam Field. I was assigned to 3 beds, and my first 3 patients that came in expired without being able to do anything for them.
The first wave of the Japanese attack caused immediate confusion. But now, the second wave creates total chaos. Americans fire at anything in the sky. Tragically, some of the planes shot down were the unarmed United States B-17s from the mainland and the planes sent by the U.S. carriers.